Assuming I was still alive.
Assuming you were still alive. Yes. Welcome to Finding Danny Lightfoot, the podcast where we explore the mystery of Joe Torres, who played Danny Lightfoot on Nickelodeon's Hey Dude. I'm your host, Luke Pickard, with my longtime friend John Kimball. Join us as we explore clues, conduct interviews, and celebrate the legacy that was Hey Dude. Yippee-ki-yay, let's go. Thank you for joining us on Finding Danny Lightfoot, the podcast. This is episode 9. It's going to be released on Sunday, October the 27th, 2024. I am Luke Pickard, here with my longtime friend John Kimball, and we have a lot to talk about, as you could imagine. So first, John is going to talk about what this podcast is about and an overview of what we're doing here. Then we're going to go on to talk about the last couple of days or week, really, and how crazy of a whirlwind that's been for us. Then we're going to have an interview with Mr. Joe Torres, who played Danny on Nickelodeon's Hey Dude. And then we're going to have some closing thoughts by John and I at the very end. So, John, for those who are joining us for the first time, or for those that might not recall, tell everybody what this podcast is about.
Here on Finding Danny Lightfoot, our goal is to locate the actor Joe Torres, who played Danny Lightfoot on the television series Hey Dude in the late 80s and early 90s, and then basically disappeared from the public eye for 30 plus years. There have been rumors for a long time all over the internet about what he's been up to and where he's been, and our goal is to figure out what's true and what's not. Importantly, we've always said we're respectful of his privacy and are not attempting to dox him or reveal information about him that isn't something that he wants to be revealed. And so we continue to follow that rule, even though we have, as we mentioned last episode, found Joe Torres, who played Danny Lightfoot on Hey Dude. It's been a roller coaster these past few weeks as Luke and I have taken what was secondhand and had an investigation. Then the announcement came out that Joe had been found, and he was going to be appearing at this thing called SplatCon.
Yes, SplatCon in Los Angeles. So this is a big event like a Comic-Con or a 90s Con, where basically all these Nickelodeon 90s stars come together to talk about their experiences on the show with their fans and maybe sign autographs, get photos taken, or do panels. So go ahead and tell everybody what happened and how that all went down, John.
I live in Los Angeles. Luke had made plans to come out to Los Angeles, and we were discussing what this is going to be like. We anticipated a chance to ask these questions, the who is Danny Lightfoot questions, or the who is Joe Torres questions that we've been talking about on the past couple of episodes. We were thrilled, and it seemed like everything was going even beyond how we anticipated. It seemed like this was the ideal possible solution. We had found him. We had brought him into the public eye. He was going to appear at this convention. And then I was actually talking about how everything had worked out. I was on the phone with a former colleague when Luke sent me a text. SplatCon canceled. The day before SplatCon was supposed to occur.
I couldn't believe it. I thought it was a joke at first. I was like, really? How would they cancel this close to the time that it was starting?
They didn't bring in as much money as they had hoped, it seemed like, and the whole thing fell apart. Luke and I got on the phone. We were talking about what does this mean for our podcast, for the finding of Danny Lightfoot that had occurred. Luke was considering, like, do I cancel my flight? Do I move on? And he ultimately decided, based on some other conversations he had had, that there may still be a chance.
I received several messages around the same time about the event being canceled. I went on to the Instagram site to confirm it. While I was on there, I saw a lot of people complaining about the money they had lost or the time they had spent. And if anybody had a right to complain about this, it was everybody affiliated with the Hey Dude show, because they had not only lost the time and the money of going out there, but any potential revenue they were going to earn from the event was now gone. But that's not what happened. And that ultimately became one of the reasons I continued to travel out there, is because I heard they were still trying to make this work for themselves so that they could get together, because it had been a minute since all of the staff had been under the same roof, especially with Joe Torres. And I think them putting all that crazy stuff that they can't control, the cancellation, the lost money, etc., behind them in order to get together as a cast because they value those relationships says a lot about them as people. So go ahead, John. Sorry.
Luke made the decision to take the risk that maybe we might be able to meet with Joe if he came out here. And so he did. He got on the plane and he flew out here. The whole time he's trying to figure out what we could do to make this happen. And I didn't have much free time on October the 19th to do anything, but it seemed like everything was building up toward October 19th being the day that this potential meetup would occur. But I was trying to negotiate things, my family responsibilities and that sort of thing, to see if I could find a few minutes if something did indeed work out. So Luke tirelessly worked on this and he was able to make it happen.
So in the end, what happened is one of the writers for the show had decided to host an event at her home in Los Angeles for all of the Hey Dude staff to get together. So luckily for us, Miss Debbie Coleman was able to advocate for us and what we were doing and get us permission to be there for this event, or at least some portion of this event, and furthermore, to potentially do interviews with anybody that was willing, including Mr. Torres, which was just excellent. So for those following, in about a period of 8 hours, we had gone from going to SplatCon to not going to SplatCon to going to Los Angeles and hoping for the best to being invited to the home of a writer from the show to meet with the cast and possibly conduct interviews. Whew. Just crazy. So John and I ended up arriving at different times. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about what it was like for me, and then John will talk about what his experience was like. So Saturday morning rolls around. I wake up early because I'm super excited / nervous. And I get a text that says when and where to be. And then it also says that David Brisbane, who played Mr. Ernst, David Lasher, and Christine Taylor will not be there at the time that we're going to be there. So a little disappointed, but still excited I get to meet everybody else. And of course, Mr. Torres. So I'm getting some lunch and then I'm going to go to the house and I get another text that says that Christine Taylor and David Lasher will be there just a little bit later. So that was good to hear. So at around 2:30, I walk into this beautiful home in Los Angeles, and the first person I see is Allison. And at this point, she feels like a friend because we've talked so much. And then I see some other faces that I don't recognize, but then I see some that I do recognize. And those people are Miss Debbie Coleman and Kelly Brown and Josh Tygell and Jonathan Galkin, and it was just crazy. So some of the faces that I didn't recognize turned out to be the homeowner and the writer, Miss Lisa Melamed, I believe is how you say her last name, who is super gracious to have us in her home. Miss Debbie Coleman's 2 adult children were there, and the host of the Yay Dude podcast, Jess and Teresa, were there. I didn't see Joe Torres. As it turned out, I actually had to find Joe Torres. Yes, I had to find Danny Lightfoot. This highlights part of his sense of humor that I think is so endearing, because I'm certain this was his idea. I had to look for him. So I'm in this home that I've never been in, and I've got to find this guy that I've never met. So I'm walking around. I head to one area of the house that's the patio, and he's not there. I head to this other area of the house, and immediately people start saying, no, not back there, not back there. So I realized, okay, not that way. And I turned the other way, and Kelly Brown looks up and decides to throw me a bone and says, he's outside by the patio behind the grill. So I immediately just made a beeline for the patio, walked to the grill, and there he is. So I shook his hand in this out-of-body experience, and yes, I had found Danny Lightfoot. So after talking to Mr. Torres for a moment, I go back inside and introduce myself to everyone else. I'm just in disbelief of who all is around. I'm trying to keep my mouth shut despite all of my excitement and just take all of this in. After a few moments, John shows up. John, what was it like for you?
I drove over Saturday afternoon, walked into a house, and immediately saw Josh Tygell, who played Buddy on Hey Dude, Debbie Coleman, who played Lucy, Kelly Brown, who played Brad, and Jonathan Galkin, who played Jake. And I walked into a room where Luke was talking with Allison Tygell, and unbeknownst to me, hiding behind Allison was Joe Torres, who played Danny Lightfoot and hasn't been seen in public in 30 years. And I asked him, Joe or Jose. He said Joe is fine for these circumstances. What I took from that kind of is like he goes by Jose, but he's fine going by Joe because he was Joe Torres on the show. We made our way into the main room where everybody else was hanging out around the kitchen table, and they were telling stories about Hey Dude. And this episode where Ted thinks there's a hitman, it's actually a photographer, but they were joking about how Joe Torres wasn't able to be in that episode. And so they just gave all his lines to Christine Taylor, who played Melody, and how if you go back and watch it, it really doesn't make sense. Some of the things that she says, because they're clearly intended for Danny to have said. So hearing all this stuff and then just being there with these former cast members and Joe, who hasn't been seen in so long, it was a really surreal experience. We took a photo. I had to leave, unfortunately, because I had other obligations. Luke was able to stay, and actually, he can tell you more about meeting David Lasher and Christine Taylor, who came by later. And he was able to sit down with Joe, go through a lot of the questions that we had, and some of them we got answers to, and some of them we didn't. But that's what's going to be the bulk of this episode, is going to be Luke's interview, really, but based on questions that we have discussed before with Joe. And the only interview with Joe Torres since Hey Dude ended 30 years ago. So we did it. We found Joe. It was a great success. It was a surreal experience being there with the cast members. And I don't know what else to say other than this is beyond the expectations we had. We thought maybe we'd get some confirmation that he was alive and well, and then we'd come on and talk about it. But instead, we're going to be able to present to you Joe Torres in his own words. Really just a fantastic result. I want to thank Luke for his dedication to this and for his hard work in making this happen. What does it mean for the podcast? Well, it means the podcast is probably wrapping up. I mean, we succeeded. Of course, we'd like to keep going and continuing this on, and maybe Luke and I will discuss possibilities of another podcast. Obviously, we had a great deal of success with this one. It was a lot of fun doing it. But we do anticipate after this episode, which will have the Joe Torres interview, we do anticipate we're going to be able to talk to some of these other cast members that we were able to meet and talk to them about their memories of Joe, but then also what it was like to reconnect with him after all these years.
Yeah, it would definitely take some time to get that together because we're going to have to coordinate with all of the former staff members and their busy schedules. So thank you to all of our listeners. Thank you to Miss Debbie Coleman, Miss Allison Tagell, and all of those who played a part in making this happen. We truly could not have done it without you. So here it is, without further ado, Mr. Joe Torres, who played Danny Lightfoot on Nickelodeon's Hey Dude. So I'm here with Mr. Joe Torres, who played Danny Lightfoot on Nickelodeon's Hey Dude. Really appreciate you being here. Thank you for the time. So one of the things that John and I would talk about frequently was what we would say to you to try to compel you to come talk to us more.
Assuming I was still alive.
Assuming you were still alive. Yes. One of the things was that everyone from the show was still alive, and we didn't want to take that for granted, and we didn't want to miss an opportunity to reunite everyone. And then SplatCon gave us that opportunity, and then they took it away. But at least we're here together.
Right.
So when you found out about the audition, was it something that your family or friends encouraged you to do? Or was it just like, you know what, I just want to do this, so I'm going to do it?
Well, I went to a fine arts high school. At least that's what was in the name of the high school. And I was pretty heavily into the graphic arts. And the director of the fine arts program, knew me, saw me around because I was always in that section of the high school. And she received a call from Nickelodeon saying that there was an open cast call for Native American or Native American looking males. And so she just happened to mention it to me. I never did anything on the theater side.
Really?
So that kind of struck me as odd. And I thought about it for a while, and I just figured, well, why not? Because you never know what's going to happen.
Sure.
You miss 100% of the shots that you don't take.
Mm-hmm.
So I did the initial interview. They videotaped me, and we had like an interview type thing, and they had me read part of a script, and then that was that. And then about a week later, I get a phone call saying they'd like me to come in and audition. So I went ahead and I did that, and they wanted to see, like what kind of rapport I have with some of the other characters, because they were already cast and they were already there. So they did that, and the next morning they got a call saying, hey, if you want it, we would really like to cast you in this part.
How old were you at this time?
Pretty sure I was 17. So I was still in high school.
So the motivation for this, was it from the artistic side? You just wanted to be involved in something like that? Or was it more because you're 17, you're going to be on TV, there's some money involved?
The motivation for it was probably more just a new experience. It's scary,
Sure.
to do something that you've never done before. And some of those early episodes are, for me, like fairly cringeworthy. If they didn't have faith in me, they wouldn't have kept me on. That's the way I figure it.
Yeah, sure.
So they saw something.
Interesting. I always wondered if your parents push you, sort of like parents will push their children to be in pageants or play sports.
Right. Yeah, they pretty much left it up to me, saying, hey, you can go ahead, do it, we got your back, or you can walk away from it and go on with the rest of your life.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So were there other people there during your audition, or was it just you?
The first one was, I believe, just one-on-one, and then they set up like a video camera to see if I was animated, like facially. Because you know how some people can be like very
stoic.
Yeah. And I guess I had like the right mixture of not just standing there going like, yes, okay.
Yeah, charisma. I could tell within like 2 or 3 minutes of meeting you that you still had that charm or charisma, whatever you want to call it.
Exactly.
So after you joined the cast, did you notice that anyone treated you differently? Like your friends or your family? Did they suddenly seem closer, or did things mostly stay the same?
I actually insisted on being treated the same way. And, especially when you're a kid getting older and whatnot, you start to realize like who are your true friends and who were like your wannabe friends. I had people that never would have said a word to me in high school. By the time I graduated, it was like, oh, they were, oh yeah, this is my best friend. Remember we had, math class freshman year.
I threw a paper airplane at you once. Remember that?
Yes.
We were best
stuff
friends.
Like that. And your best friends are the people who call you out when you get like a little bit too big for your britches.
Yeah, I get that. So what are some of your favorite memories from the show?
One of the things that I liked was that for the most part, the cast and the crew were comfortable enough with each other to play practical jokes on. It wasn't, we were serious, but we also knew how to have fun.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Like that politically correctness that you have nowadays, it almost takes away from some of that candidness or whatever you want to call it.
And, there, like anywhere, there's going to be, like off-color statements made.
Yeah.
And, people get frustrated with things, or they maybe say something out loud that they may have been thinking, and they didn't think about it before they said it. Yeah. And back then, people took it.
It's different.
Right. And now people are so quick to.
Yeah, you're right. It's
label
weird.
them like, oh, you said this, so that must mean that you are.
Blank. Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah. And I don't get it. I don't like it.
It's weird how times change like that, and it's hard to pinpoint a moment when that happened.
Yeah, it's like the frog sitting in a pot of water on the stove.
Yeah, he's going to burn himself to death. Yeah.
Yep.
So who were the ones that you were closest to on the set?
I would say for the first, I think maybe like 3 seasons or so, it was me, Christine, and David, because we were all about the same age. And although we may have had different interests, just the amount of time that we spent around each other, doing work and living in proximity to each other, we get home from a day of shooting, and everybody would wash up and whatever, and it's like, okay, where are we gonna go eat? Or do we want to go see a movie, or stuff like that. So we're forced to interact with each other, and I'm very grateful that all of our personalities kind of meshed to where it wasn't like somebody had a severe aversion to anybody else.
That's really fortunate, especially with that big of a cast.
Right.
I'm sure the larger the cast, the more the odds are stacked against you.
Yeah. The other great thing was that usually for dinner it was like an open invitation. Like if the other people wanted to join in, come on. The
That's
more
awesome.
the merrier.
That might have also been because, and this is something that Michael Cagle talked to us about, nobody really knew if Nickelodeon was going to make it, right? It was such a new station. Everything was so lax. I'm just assuming here that maybe there wasn't a lot of formality and red tape.
I think part of it worked because we weren't necessarily following a formula or a recipe.
Yeah.
We were just kind of throwing stuff at the wall, seeing what stuck and what stunk.
Yeah.
You know, because there's some things that we tried that, man, they didn't quite work. But you gotta have the balls to try it.
Yeah.
And have a network say, hey, go for it, man.
It's one of those things that, like, so many things have to come together in order to make this a success. And that's really what happened with Hey Dude. You had the formula right, you had the funding, you had the network, you had the fans, you had the cast, you had the writers. Like, all of those things had to go right to make it work. And it did.
To this day, that really does astound me. So many things could have gone wrong. The network could have said, after the first episode or even the first season, we don't like what we're seeing here. But the network had faith. So
Did you know there was a book based on one of the episodes?
I did, and I believe that is the only mention of Danny's last name.
Is it? We were wondering how we knew Danny's last name, and we could not pinpoint where we got it from, but it might be that book.
I am fairly certain that the whole run of the show, the character's last name was never mentioned.
Somehow we knew it before we knew about the book. We'll have to go back and research that.
Maybe you're clairvoyant, man.
And we just predicted Lightfoot.
There you go.
So when is the last time you watched one of the episodes of Hey Dude?
Oh, lordy, 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 lord.
It's been a minute.
Yeah, a couple of them.
Would you say that it's been years?
Oh, easily.
So it wasn't like recently.
Right.
So when I hear myself on a recording, I just clam up because it sounds so cringeworthy. Is that how it is for you to watch reruns of the show, or are you just kind of like,
For the most part, the earlier episodes, because I really didn't know what I was doing. I was just trying to fake it till I make it. And some of those, I look back and I was like, I could have done this different. I could have, there are certain things like that. Like I could have come up with something funnier there.
Did they give you guys a lot of freedom to ad-lib and improvise, or was it more like stick to the script?
It depends on if the ad-lib worked. They'd get mad at us because this is, if we're rolling tape,
yeah.
Like when we had a read-through and, like there was an ad-lib, you could try it, see if the director liked it, and then put it in. But if you were in front of the camera and you ad-lib,
It's a different risk.
oh yeah, big time. Unless you're, somebody that has the confidence of the director to be able to, like pull off, like most of your ad-libs. And that's a skill set that not a lot of people have.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite episode?
I think it might have been the episode where I had to jump a motorcycle in front of Arnold's to raise money to save the diner.
I don't remember this episode.
Yeah, that would.
I have to. Is that the lost episode?
It could be.
We've actually talked about there being a lost episode, so
Yeah.
I don't remember you doing any. Did you do your own stunts?
Oh yeah, yeah, all me, man. Me and Tom Cruise.
Tom Cruise.
Where do you think Tom Cruise got the idea from?
I thought he said Joe Torres. Yeah, I thought he said that. I was like, that must have been another Joe Torres.
Yeah,
it's funny.
The other one that I was fairly proud of, but they ended up not using it, was when I jumped a trout in the lake on water skis.
You were skiing.
I was on water
and it
skis
jumped.
behind the rowboat because we had that fishing pond.
Yeah.
and I jumped. There's a pretty big trout in there. Must have been like at least 8 inches or so. And I done jumped that in my water skis.
It's funny. I thought
I was wearing my denim.
Did you? You had your denim tight, your swim trunks on and everything?
Yeah. And boots. And cowboy boots. Yep.
That's funny. I don't remember. I have to go back and rewatch them because I don't remember those episodes. But
has anyone contacted you or reached out to you about participating in any other Hey Dude related events since the show wrapped?
That would be a negatory.
Really? We were the first. Interesting. Do you still draw?
Not as much as I should, and that's I don't know why, but that was one of the things on the set. I either had my sketch pad or I had a book.
Yeah.
And on my downtime.
Book like a book you read, or a book like a sketch pad or sketchbook?
Usually, the pop-up books.
Okay, those are my favorite.
I was learning my letters.
Man, that school system there needs to be checked into. I gotta tell you, if that's where they were at that time, that's cool. I saw that you had that political book in there. What was it?
Paranoid Style of American Politics.
That's one that you had.
Yeah, that's something I started reading, and then I found a book I had been looking for before, so I kind of put that aside and started reading the book that I had been looking for. And I've got like a stack of books that eventually I do finish them, but it just takes some time.
My co-host John, that you met earlier, he's a big reader too. He's actually written several books. He's not out in LA for that, but it's sort of a side hobby for him. So would you ever draw for commission?
Oh, what I would probably have to do before that is get my skills back up. It's a skill that if you don't use, it deteriorates.
Yeah.
And at this point, I don't think I have the drawing chops, apart from doing some real rough sketches, to do anything that I would want anybody to pay money for.
Yeah.
I heard a story that to pay some of his, like a restaurant tab or something, Picasso would just like sketch on a notepad or a menu or something, and then sign it Picasso and go here. But he had the clout, and I think Salvador Dali would do the same.
Really?
Yeah, and if you think about it, money, like printed money isn't really that much different. It's got an assumed value.
Yeah.
But is it really like tangible? Is it worth anything?
Yeah, it's all in the eye of the beholder almost. You know?
Is it worth anything unless we agree that it has worth?
Yeah. I'm just anticipating someone trying to buy a piece of art from you on commission, but that's a good answer though.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't feel right doing it just so that somebody could say, oh, I have.
Yeah, that makes sense. When is the last time that you visited the set?
Oh my, probably over 30 years.
Have you been out since the show wrapped?
I went out once. It must have been within a year of the show wrapping, and it was still like pretty much standing. I basically wanted to see if they were just going to do like a tear down or repurpose stuff, which that's their prerogative.
Yeah. Do you know if it's still owned by the same company or the same people that owned it while you guys were filming?
I would assume so, because it was on, their property.
Have you seen any photos of it since then?
No, I have not.
I've seen pictures of it online, and it's fairly dilapidated, but I'm sure that's just because it's a set, it's not up to code, it's not in use, it's not maintained.
So it's kind of like a ghost town now?
Yeah, there's stuff growing up, like weeds and grass, and doors are knocked down, and windows are knocked out, and then it looks like some of the place is being used for storage. I don't know. It was only like 4 or 5 buildings, right?
Yeah, I believe so. I don't know if the corral was pre-existing. More than likely, I believe the corral was pre-existing, but I know that I want to say they just like roughly framed out the other structures that were prominent in the show.
So I heard somewhere that you guys would change outfits and have wardrobe changes in the bunks when they weren't in use. Is that right?
If they did, nobody told me. They just said, "Hey,
you were just out.
go behind that cacti right there." And
That must have been one of those pranks they pulled, right?
yeah, well, they done got me good.
You never got bit by one of those cactus or rattlesnakes, did you?
Oh, but I bit a couple of them.
Did you? Were you venomous? So these next few questions are about the search for you, right? So to what extent were you aware that people were looking for you?
I'd heard people come up to me with rumors about where I was, what I was doing, if I was still around.
Like random people or people that you knew?
No. These were people that I knew.
Okay.
And they say, "Oh, do you know that you're allegedly dead?" I go, "Well, who do you think started that rumor?"
So your decision to stay out of the spotlight, was that an active decision that you made, or was it more of a passive decision?
I think it was thrust upon me.
Thrust upon you. That's interesting. Like someone made you want to do it?
To stay out of the spotlight?
Yeah.
No, I think the spotlight just got turned on.
Okay, I see what you're saying. So it wasn't really a choice. It was just the spotlight left. And you were just like,
and then I got
hey.
used to the darkness. And then somebody brought a night light. Blah, 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 blah. Did the whole Dracula thing.
So let's get to the bottom of some of these rumors that are circulating about your whereabouts, like you working in real estate or car sales.
You mean like chop shops?
Apparently you sold cars in New Jersey.
Oh, why would I do that?
That's just what they said, and they're never wrong. You know? Have you ever been abducted by aliens? Is this really you?
Is this me? That is a question I question myself about
every day.
Every day. Am I really me?
That's pretty deep. Have you ever coached a Major League Baseball team like, let's say, the Yankees?
I did on TV.
You did on TV?
Well, watching TV.
Oh, yelling at them?
Why the hell did you do that?
Do you play pool, or have you played pool?
I think I played it once. And I was so good, I said, well, what's the
You already
point?
perfected it? Was it 9-ball or 8-ball?
Both.
Both?
At the same time.
So it's 17-ball?
Yeah.
That's impressive.
Oh, yeah, well, I got talents, man.
Clearly. Were you upset that people were looking for you at all?
It doesn't bother me. If you think about it, it's flattering.
Mm-hmm.
But I never really considered myself to be important enough to be the focus of that kind of attention.
Yeah, I get that. So just some background on the podcast. I don't know how much you know about it, but John and I had this idea in the late 90s or early 2000s, right around the same time the internet came out and the internet started being a thing. That was when we were at Ole Miss in Mississippi. Have you ever heard of Ole Miss?
Yeah, Ole Miss.
Yeah. Everybody that doesn't know and has never heard Ole Miss, they think Ole Miss.
It's Spanish.
Yes, it is.
It's a matador school.
That should be our mascot. We should have a matador.
Yeah.
So back in our school days, John and I had this wild idea to reunite the cast of Hey Dude through a fan tour. Half jokingly, we posted about it on IMDb, and it unexpectedly blew up, becoming the top thread until IMDb took the boards down a few years ago. So here we are about 10 years after the show had ended, and we started gathering support for this crazy idea, knowing full well we'd probably never actually do it. Yet somehow we had volunteers offering to film, a bus donation lined up, and about 100 fans hypothetically on board. The plan was to start in Mississippi and track down former cast members with a stop-by-stop approach until, ideally, we'd meet up with cast members still active and acting, like, at the time, David Lasher and Christine Taylor. We didn't really have a clear end game, maybe getting them to film new episodes, I don't know, but as we began reaching out, we quickly discovered how hard it was to find Mr. Joe Torres. And that's really where the journey of Finding Danny Lightfoot began. Okay, we received word that we got to start wrapping it up, so I'll ask a couple of quick questions at the end here. Do you have a preference of Jose versus Joe?
Joe's fine.
Do you have any indigenous roots from the region or any native heritage that you're aware of?
Um, yes, I do, but I've never been affiliated with any established tribe.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that's it. I really appreciate your time. Thank you for being here. I'm still in disbelief that you're sitting in front of me, but I'm glad to have the opportunity to talk to you for sure. So that's the conclusion of the interview. We are so thankful to have that opportunity. And I'll give a couple of closing thoughts, and then I'll let John give a couple of his closing thoughts before we finish up. First, just being with this cast for the few hours that I was with them, you really see how strong those relationships are and how they really are like a family. That was really impressive to me. Seeing all of them put all of the SplatCon nonsense behind them and still use this opportunity to get together was really impressive to me. I don't think I heard one of them say anything about SplatCon or how it ruined anything or they lost money. I don't think any of them were concerned at all with that. I think they were just happy to have the opportunity to spend together, and that was really encouraging to see. We will be back with another episode that will hopefully include the interview with Allison Teigel and include the interviews of other cast members as we work towards that. And hopefully we'll have that by the end of the year. Then, if anybody has any questions that they want to ask of John and I that we can enlighten you guys on based on our experiences, feel free to email them as always to findingdannylightfoot@gmail.com. We will try to address those if there are any on the last episode. So, John, what did you think about that interview, man?
I'm starting to lose my voice a little bit. I think it's probably because I've been running up and down the streets shouting to anyone within hearing range that we found Joe Torres, who played Danny Lightfoot on Hey Dude back in the late 80s and early 90s. Truthfully, what an exciting conclusion, to our podcast. As we spoke about in the beginning, we'll likely do at least one other episode where we're kind of recapping everything and potentially interviewing some of these other cast members about what it was like to find Joe. But one thing that kept crossing my mind during this interview is we didn't know what kind of person we would find when we found Joe. We didn't know if this is somebody who really had a lot of spite toward the show Hey Dude, and it ruined my life, and they're an angry person or something like that. We didn't know if it would be somebody who just hadn't thought about it at all since then. But instead, what we got was Joe Torres, an extremely funny person. I mean, sorry, Luke, but I think this is our funniest episode just based on Joe.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
Maybe that's a low bar. The funniest Finding Danny Lightfoot episode, but he's had so many comments that I thought were genuinely very funny, joking about, I think they're like Happy Days episodes that he's kind of parroting back as his favorite episode, and enlightened jokes about his disappearance and the self-awareness that went along with that. He's an intelligent person. I mean, talking about the paranoid style of American politics and, these stories he told about Picasso and Salvador Dali and things like that. I was just like, wow, this is a guy who is well-read. He's an intelligent person. He's got like a good perspective on all this stuff, There did not appear to me to be any animosity toward the show or anyone involved with the show. I mean, there's a part of it that it seemed like maybe, he didn't think it was the world's greatest show, which we've said on Finding Danny Lightfoot. It was a silly show. It was a show aimed at a certain audience, and he recognizes that, but it doesn't seem like there's any negative feelings toward that. I thought he had so many interesting things to say about the show, insightful. When Luke, when you and Joe were talking about the spotlight turning off, and he said, and then I got used to the darkness.
Yeah.
I was like, well, it's like very profound, I mean, he lived his life up until 17, in a certain kind of way, then this very wild and strange thing happened with this casting in a show that became popular with hundreds of thousands or millions of kids of a certain age for a few short years. And then the spotlight turns off. And you know, what is it? It's what Michael Cagle said. And I mentioned this at the time because it struck me. But Michael Cagle, in predicting, without any knowledge of where Joe is today, and predicting it, he said, I kind of think Joe just went back to his life. And it does seem like that's what happened. Joe lived his life a certain type of way up until 17. He had this crazy experience making Hey Dude, and then he returned to his life. And he lived the rest of his life the way he always intended to live it. I don't mean that in a negative way. The life of a regular person, not a celebrity, can be, you know, equally as fulfilling as Tom Cruise, who he joked about in the interview, giving the idea for doing his own stunts. The way that he is able to discuss the experience and put the experience in its proper place, I don't think we could have been any luckier as far as finding him, as far as the type of person we found. I'm so grateful that we were able to do this. I think he, truthfully, is a really interesting person, and he's a thoughtful person who is able to be self-deprecating and put everything in its proper perspective. And again, I didn't feel any anger or animosity toward the show or anyone involved with the show. To me, it just felt like Joe moved on. He went back to the rest of his life. And, you know, he seems happy. He seems happy. And that makes me really happy too. And I couldn't be more impressed with who Joe Torres is today. I just want to close by saying it's been a really profound experience. We entered into this search not knowing how it would go and what we would find. And we exceeded our wildest expectations. I was able to spend some wonderful times talking about this and watching it develop with my good friend Luke. And, you know, all of it culminated in this meeting, in this interview. And as a fan of the show, who wondered about this mystery myself for, I don't know, I feel like we keep throwing out numbers, but truthfully, more than 20 years, wondering where Joe is. And then just seeing him, and then just hearing him and that voice, you know, that carries you right back to Danny Lightfoot, imparting the wisdom, bringing everybody together the same way he always did. It's been a great experience, and thank you all for joining us. And there may be a little bit more, but we've done it. All of us together have done it. We found Joe.